Hello, this is Gallifreyan Jedi, and I want to welcome you to my YouTube channel. And today I want to talk about, for my next blog, I want to talk about Doctor Who Series 8, the premiere of it. And I'm kind of a little late, so I do apologize getting this done. I wanted to get this done earlier this week because Series 8 premieres tomorrow on Saturday. August 23rd of 2014 at 8 p.m. And it will be aired on BBC America. That's where it will be shown in the United States. And the title of the new episode will be called Deep Breath. And I don't know too much about it. I know we live in a day and age where we're spoilers. We have spoilers. I didn't bother to look. I try to stay away from spoilers, and I know that goes against the grain of pop culture today because everybody just loves to find out what's happening in the new season, the new episodes, or the new movie. But I try to learn a little bit about it because I like to be surprised as I watch it first time. So I can't tell you what Deep Breath is about. So I do apologize. But anyway, to move on. It will have Peter Capaldi as the new Doctor. This will be the first episode, the first time we see him, because he, if you remember, in the last one there was a regeneration from Matt Smith to Peter Capaldi. So Peter Capaldi is now taking over the role of the Doctor. He will be the new Doctor starting tomorrow. But I want to take this time to talk about where we left off at. And if you've been following the new series, Matt Smith, he's just finished his 3-year run as the Doctor. And the last 3 stories he did, last 3 episodes, were sort of a trilogy. The finale for Series 7 was The Name of the Doctor. Then we had the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, when Doctor Who originally started. In November of 1963, November of 2013 was the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, and we had the 50th anniversary mini-movie slash episode called The Day of the Doctor. That was the middle part of that trilogy. And then for our Christmas special, which we usually have every year, it was The Time of the Doctor. That was Matt Smith's final episode. That was the Christmas episode. And in that episode, we see everything being the entire story arc of Matt Smith's era as a Doctor, all the loose ends being tied up, and also we learned certain mysteries that were talked about earlier in Matt Smith's time, and at the end we see Matt Smith have regeneration, which he regenerates into the Doctor that Peter Capaldi will be playing. Now, technically, he is popularly known as Matt Smith is known as the 11th Doctor, but technically, for continuity, he's actually the 12th Doctor, and let me explain why. Because what we learned in The Day of the Doctor is that John Hurt, the actor John Hurt, played a short role as the Doctor. He was known as the Ward Doctor. Now, John Hurt played in movies such as the first Alien movie, if you might remember. Very good actor. But he had a role as Doctor Who. In the Day of the Doctor, we learned that he was the War Doctor. He was the Doctor that the Sisterhood of Karn had helped transform in his regeneration, so he could actually go and fight in the war, the last great Time War, the Time Lords' war against the Daleks. And he was the one who committed the atrocities, such as destroying Gallifrey in order to end the Time War. And because of that, Matt Smith's Doctor had mentioned that he was hardly ever mentioned because of that shame, because of that grief and that shame over the atrocities that the War Doctor had committed. But technically, he would be the 11th Doctor. John Hurt, the War Doctor, would be the 11th, and Matt Smith, technically, according to continuity, would be the 12th. Although popular, he's known as the 11th. So naturally, Peter Capaldi would be the 13th. And it should be emphasized, because it's the 13th, it's a whole new regeneration cycles. If you've seen the time of the Doctor, you know that the Doctor returns to Transalore, and he stays there for the remainder of his life, or the life that he's in that particular regeneration, to fight off all the enemies that are trying to destroy that world in order to prevent the Time Lords from coming back. And at the end of his life, he reveals that he cannot regenerate anymore because he's at his 12th, his final regeneration. See that each Time Lord is granted 12 regenerations before natural death occurs. He was on his final. And what happened was, is that the Time Lords were trapped into another universe, granted them special dispensation, a whole new set of regeneration cycles, which is almost unheard of. But the Doctor got a whole new set of regeneration cycles, which the first is Peter Capaldi's Doctor. But keep in mind that the Time Lords were each given 12 regeneration cycles before natural death occurs. But moving on from that, we also learn about the companion. Keep in mind, the Doctor usually has a companion. There was one time in the original series, The Deadly Assassin, which he didn't have a companion, and maybe 3 of the Christmas specials or so with David Tennant, he didn't have a companion, I don't believe. But usually the Doctor has a companion, and usually it's a female humanoid, very attractive female humanoid. From last season, where we picked up from last season, the character of Clara Oswald, played by Jenna-Louise Coleman. She will be coming back to play Clara Oswald. And to give you a little bit of background on Clara, she was a mistress. She entered into the Doctor's life in Matt Smith's final year. She was a mistress because every time she showed up, okay, let me back up a little bit. Every time the Doctor had met her, and then she had died, and then he went to another time or another planet, and he met her again. And this was a mystery, because how could one person be in multiple places and multiple time zones at the same time, and then die, and then be seen again? So it was a great mystery throughout the season, and the Doctor was trying to figure out who she was. Well, in the name of the Doctor, it was revealed. Because keep in mind, the Doctor was sent to Transalore, the planet Transalore, where there was this great battle, which we have seen in the time of the Doctor. Well, the Doctor had died in this continuity, in this timeline, and the Transalore turned into a great battlefield, a graveyard, where a battlefield was. And you see the TARDIS there, and that's where the Doctor was buried, inside the TARDIS. And last element that was left was energy, residual energy, which could be entered into a time vortex if you followed into it. Well, the Doctor's enemy, the Great Intelligence, was battled during the time of Matt Smith. It was also an enemy during the time of the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton. And if anybody's familiar with the classic Doctor Who, that was the Great Intelligence used the Yeti. There was the abominable snowman, and the Yeti was used as a weapon by the Great Intelligence. Well, the Great Intelligence returns during Matt Smith's time, and it tries to destroy the Doctor's timeline by entering into that vortex, and then going back and destroying every part of the Doctor's timeline, destroying every victory that he had ever since the time of the first Doctor, William Hartnell's time. Well, Clara makes the ultimate sacrifice. She steps through, against the warning that was given to her by River Song, she steps through that vortex, goes into that vortex, and technically she dies, but there's 1 million copies that's made of her because the time winds. The time winds cause her to break up into millions of copies. So the original copy of her dies technically, but she gets broken up into millions of pieces. And she goes back. So everything that the Great Intelligence destroyed in the Doctor's timeline, she rewrites and puts it back so the continuity of the Doctor's timeline is fixed, and she is saved. I mean, the Doctor's timeline is saved. His life is saved. His timeline is saved. But at the time, Clara, one of the copies of Clara, does continue on with the Doctor and become his companion, and that's where we will pick up in this new season, or this new series of Doctor Who. But picking up from that, I want to talk a little bit about where we are. I mean, pretty much over the 50 years, I can't do an exposition of everything, but I want to deal with from the first Doctor all the way up now to Peter Capaldi, just to talk a little bit about where we have been. Like I said, the Time Lords only grant each Time Lord is only granted 12 regeneration cycles. That was started by Rassilon. He is the founder of Time Lord Society from the time of ancient Gallifrey. He's a Doctor's ancestor, one of the Doctor's ancestors, but he's the founder of Time Lord Society and Time Lord Law. And Rassilon set it to only 12 regeneration cycles, so the Time Lords wouldn't become immortal. They would become like gods. They would still have a natural death, because keep in mind, the Time Lords live long lives. They live hundreds of years because of their regeneration cycles. They can live hundreds of years, maybe even a couple thousand. But they're not immortal. They do die. They do have a natural lifespan like all living things do, and they do die. But let's go back now to the first Doctor. In 1963, when Doctor Who first began in England, William Hartnell was an actor. He was an elderly gentleman, and they had the Doctor as an older guy. And the story has it, where we pick up on, is that his granddaughter Susan is with him, living with him inside the TARDIS. But she's living, even though she's Gallifreyan. We don't know anything, keep in mind, about Time Lords or Gallifrey at this point. We don't know anything about the Doctor. But we see Susan at a high school. She's living the life of a normal teenager in the 1960s. And she's in high school, and she has vast knowledge that no human should have, about human history from the past and also from the future. Well, this sparks the interest of two of her teachers, Ian and Barbara. And they follow her home one night to the junkyard where the TARDIS is at. And when they meet the Doctor, they get suspicious of him and force their way into the TARDIS, and that's when they find out that Susan and her grandfather are not from Earth. In which both of them reveal that they have left their planet. They're exiles from their home planet. And they reveal a little bit. We don't know too much about Gallifrey or the Time Lords, but like I said, they reveal that their civilization had were vastly superior, technologically advanced, and they had went through their golden age of civilization long before human beings were on the Earth, or even the Earth was created. But the Doctor had stolen this TARDIS. The TARDIS was a Type 40 TARDIS. It was an antique. It doesn't work too well. He can't control it too well, and that's why the Doctor, when he's time traveling, he can't control what time zone or what planet it goes to, and that's where they have their adventures. After 3 years, William Hartnell steps down for health reasons. He steps down as the Doctor, and Patrick Troughton, he takes over as the Doctor, as a second Doctor. In that, we learn more about the villains and different planets that the Doctor has been visiting throughout his tenure during his travels. More about enemies, more about the Daleks and the Cybermen. And we get introduced to the Great Intelligence, and also the Ice Warriors, which, interesting, they made a comeback previous series, Series 7, with Matt Smith. The Ice Warriors, they were a warrior alien race from the planet Mars, or from ancient Mars, when Mars had life on it. And we also learn about the Time Lords. We finally learn, thanks to Terrence Dicks, who was writing these stories at the time, we learn about the Time Lords and what they're all about. Because there was a renegade Time Lord, a criminal Time Lord, that teamed up with an intergalactic race of people who were taking human beings from Earth from various time zones throughout human history, from wars, Civil War, World War II, etc., etc., some of the wars at ancient Rome, and they put them all in an arena to fight. Well, that was that was like one of the cardinal, that was like being the prime directive in Star Trek. You don't do that. And the Doctor got involved. Well, make a long story short, the story was the final story of Patrick Troughton, and it was called The War Games. And at the end, the Time Lords intervene and to judge their own criminal, Time Lord criminal, and the others who were involved. And they gave them harsh sentences, like death, the death sentence. But the Doctor, they judged him because he had been interfering with time. You know, he had been interfering with other races and other times. But they didn't execute him because they recognized he did it for a righteous reason. To try to save people's lives, to try to save planets, and try to save civilizations. Not to destroy, not to exploit. So his punishment was to be a forced regeneration to his third regeneration and an exile to Earth. And that's where we pick up with Jon Pertwee. Jon Pertwee was the third Doctor. He's the actor who played the third Doctor. And the Doctor was exiled to Earth at this time. Time Lords did something to his TARDIS, so it would not work. He could not work his TARDIS to leave the Earth. So he was exiled to Earth. He did not like that. He didn't like the fact that being tied down to Gallifrey, yet alone being tied down to Earth. But he came across Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, who was leader of UNIT. UNIT stands for United Nations Intelligence Task Force. It was a military force that dealt with alien threats. It was their purpose. Brigadier was friends with the Doctor and offered him a job, which he reluctantly took. But he took his job was a scientific advisor of UNIT, and he became the scientific advisor throughout most of his tenure as the Doctor during Jon Pertwee's. Jon Pertwee was also known to do the jiu-jitsu and the martial arts. A lot of fans have liked that. And Jon Pertwee's Doctor, even when the Time Lords granted him the ability to time travel again, he still remained a scientific advisor for UNIT. Then, after 5 years, Jon Pertwee leaves, and Tom Baker takes over his role as the fourth Doctor. Now, he's known. He is probably best known in America for the Doctor for people who are, not really into Doctor who have an amateur knowledge of it. But he's the one with the curly hair and the long scarf. He played the Doctor the longest, believe it or not, out of all the Doctors. But he's probably the most well known because in the early '80s, when it was when it was aired on PBS, he was the first one who was shown as the Doctor, and they played his stories. Mostly his stories were played over and over again until they got to the other Doctors, until the Doctor Who became a cult favorite over here, and they brought stories from the other Doctors over. So he was well known. The most well-known Doctor. So after 7 years of playing him, then it goes over to Peter Davison. We have the fifth regeneration of the Doctor, Peter Davison's Doctor. He was the youngest for the classic series. He was the youngest. He used to play on All Creatures Great and Small, in British program. He played for 3 years as the Doctor. Came over to play 3 years as the Doctor, and it was his tenure that the Doctor had faced the most conflict in his life. Emotionally, shall I say. Because keep in mind, going back to Tom Baker and Tom Baker's last year, he left Romana. When Romana was called back to Gallifrey, he left Romana back at East Base because she wanted to be involved with their affairs. Now, Cardinal rule against the Time Lords, which emotionally affected him. He was conflicted over that. Then Peter Davison's time, there was a lot of emotional conflict because he had lost a young boy, Adric, who was his companion. Adric was killed by the Cybermen. And then he had an incident where he encountered the Silurians and the Sea Devils, and he wanted to save both the humans because they were going to war with each other on who rules Earth, because they were the home of Reptilian. They ruled the Earth before humans. And he tried to save both races, but they ended up getting wiped out. That affected him greatly. And then Tegan left after his encounter with the Daleks because of her emotional state. She was just so grieved by all the killing and all the suffering that she had seen. This affected the Doctor, and then when you get to the end, the last one of the Caves of Androzani, the Doctor was dying. He was poisoned, without to go into the details of that story. And he was gonna, I think he was so grieved, he was gonna allow himself to die, but he had visions, both from his enemies and all of his friends and previous companions. His friend and his companions were saying, "Don't die, Doctor, because your enemies would rejoice in that." And then he had a little bit of energy left to spark the regeneration, and that's where we come into the Sixth Doctor, Colin Baker. Colin Baker, don't want to go too much into detail, but he was sort of given the shaft by the BBC at the time, because there was a new guy who ran the BBC and was trying to get rid of Doctor Who at the time. But he was the Doctor only for 2 years. And he said that he wanted to play the Doctor for longer than Tom Baker, which is interesting. But we have an interesting, because the second year that Colin Baker did his stories, it was a series just like the Key of Time was in Tom Baker. There was a series, a theme, known as Trial of a Time Lord, in which they would put the Doctor on trial for crimes that he did, supposedly he did, with interfering with time. Again, they did this. But the one who did that, the prosecutor, was the Valeyard. Was known as the Valeyard. Well, we learn, which I'll have to do another blog about sometime, the Valeyard was actually an amalgamation. It was actually the Doctor himself. His own DNA they discovered was, eventually they discovered, was the Valeyard. The Valeyard was actually the Doctor. Somewhere in between his 12th and final regeneration, there was a split off time. Somehow he split off, and he is the amalgamation of everything that's dark and evil about the Doctor. And he was trying to destroy Colin Baker's Doctor, to have him charged by the Time Lords, to have him executed, so he can use the remainder of the last 5, 6 regenerations the Doctor had, and take that on for himself, so he would be free from the Doctor, who was righteous, who stood for righteousness. But I'll have to do that another blog on that. Sylvester McCoy was the 7th one. He was the last one before they actually ended the classic Doctor Who series in 1989. Then we come to Paul McGann. I accept him because technically the way the new series is going out and the way the BBC is treating it, they're treating him as canonical. Although I personally do not, maybe this is just a personal angst for me, I personally do not want to consider the movie, that American-made movie that he did, because he only did that one movie, Paul McGann, other than the short clips that they had as previews for The Day of the Doctor. But as far as his role as the Doctor, he only did that one movie back in the 90s, and I consider that very controversial, because they changed so much of Doctor Who mythology. They made the Doctor half human. He is not half human. And they even made it, and I don't know where they got this concept from, but they even had the concept that the Doctor could only operate the TARDIS in the Eye of Harmony because of his half-human part, because the Master couldn't, because he was fully Time Lord. And that just blows everything out of the water when it comes to Time Lord mythology. So I'll accept him in a way. It's like a cheat. I'll accept Paul McGann as the 8th Doctor, but not the story, his story that he did, his movie. Of course, John Hurt was the War Doctor, which we've already discussed. Then we come to the new series. It started up in 2005. Christopher Eccleston, which was pretty decent. David Tennant, I like, but again, I don't know. This is Russell T Davies' thing, because he's supposed to be a Doctor Who fan, but there's some continuity stuff. Like you even said during the final one of the final episode of David Tennant, they have Rassilon that comes back. Rassilon's an ancient ancestor. That's almost like having King Henry VIII show up at your doorstep. It's not going to happen. King Henry VIII was around 500 years ago. He's been dead for 500 years. You're now in the 21st century. King Henry VIII was 16th century. Well, that's the thing with Rassilon. He is a dead ancestor in Time Lord history. So I don't really like that, but I do like a lot of the David Tennant's episodes. Matt Smith is obviously my favorite Doctor. I think that his storylines for the new Doctor, because I'm still a huge fan of the classic. That's still my favorite. But for the new Doctor Who series, I really like Matt Smith's era because they really had some great story arcs and mysteries that they built upon each season. And then when we get to the Time of the Doctor, it really ties up all the loose ends of Doctor Who. And I think that it's brilliant how they did that. Now we have upcoming Peter Capaldi. He is the new Doctor, and I have great faith because the same writers, the same producer is involved, and I have great faith that it's going to do well. Although I don't know too much about the story, hopefully maybe we'll see that. The Time Lords are supposed to return, because keep in mind, from the time of Christopher Eccleston, the new Doctor Who series, the Doctor was the last of the Time Lords. All the Time Lords were known to have been destroyed in the last Great Time War. And the Doctor was, as I refer to him as, he was the last son of Gallifrey, the last Time Lord in the universe. And almost like in DC Comics, Kal-El, Superman, is the last son of Krypton. Well, very similar with the Doctor. He was the last son of Gallifrey. But we learned that the Time Lords haven't been destroyed. They're in another trapped in another universe. You have to see the Day of the Doctor to understand what happened, why that came to be, how time had changed. So the Time Lords actually survived, in a way. They did survive the last Great Time War, but I don't have time right now to explain how that happened. Watch the Day of the Doctor. That's where it happens. That's where it explains it. But maybe in Peter Capaldi, which I'm hoping for, that the Time Lords will return. He will have a search for Gallifrey, that the Time Lords will eventually come back, and Gallifrey will eventually come back to the normal universe. They come out of that universe they're trapped in and come into our universe, back into the normal universe. So hopefully that's what we will see in this upcoming season. I'm looking forward to it. Remember, it begins Saturday, August, which is tomorrow, August 23rd of 2014 at 8 p.m. on BBC America. That's a Saturday night. That's when it will be on. I will certainly be seeing it, and hopefully many other fans too will be sharing that experience with me as well. With that, I want to bid everyone a farewell until my next blog. I want to thank you for watching this video, and if you like it, I'd like to encourage you to subscribe to my channel so you will get all the new updates that I make. But in the meantime, may the Force be with you.